small part
All right, so I want to respond to some of what's here.
written in. Well, Hajar is saying this. It's تناقضات. Lead in Tawheed, right? I believe the Quran
as they claim.
saying Al-Imam Ibn Hajar and Al-Imam Nawawi are Ash'ariyya is a kadhib and it's a lie.
How can that?
So I want to stop here for 1 second.
Yani Ibn Hajar gave a wasiyya. Sorry, Fakhruddin al-Razi gave a wasiyya. Ibn Hajar is saying this. He's saying Fakhruddin al-Razi gave a wasiyya. Farewell. This farewell is what? Yani that he repented, which is well known that he's repentance. Inshallah, if we get another series on the issue of Allah's names and attributes, I will go into details in there. Inshallah, and the reference and exactly where it's written in. Ibn Hajar is saying Fakhruddin al-Razi gave a wasiyah where he perfected his aqidah. I just mentioned Fakhruddin al-Razi is one of the horsemen and he's one of the forefront imams Ash'ariyah, and he's saying that he perfected his aqidah. Ibn Hajar, he's an Ash'ari according to them. He wouldn't say
So I'm going to respond to that, but give me a second.
that about his own imam, unless the Ash'ari aqidah to Ibn Hajar is not what he. By the way, when you say someone is Ash'ari, did Ibn Hajar ever claim it? Bring us. I dare them. I dare them. Where Ibn Hajar said, I am Ash'ari. Or Nawawi said, I am Ash'ari. Prove it to me.
Did they say I'm
All right, let's pause. All right, so if you actually watch the rest of it, he says that, oh, okay, so, this is his kind of what he says. This guy's name is Abdul Rahman. He says, okay, Al-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar, sometimes they do ta'wil of the attributes. That doesn't make them Ash'ari, right? Well, let me just show you.
Athari?
Some of Allah's names and attributes, and they did. Nawawi accept is though, and it's the reality in front of us. Ibn Hajar and Nawawi both came to some of Allah's names and attributes, and they did do ta'wil of it.
Okay.
There's a difference. I told you this before. A person who doesn't believe the Quran and Sunnah is evidence or proof whatsoever, and comes to Allah's names and attributes with a belief before that, and that the Quran and Sunnah is not a proof in and within itself, which I mentioned, Baqillani statements, al-usul al-kufr, التمسك بظواهر النصوص.
No, of course not.
That's what Ash'ari believe. The forefront and the card carriers of the Ash'ari is Subki. It's well known.
Okay, so anyways, he basically says they do ta'wil of the attributes. He basically says in the end,
Nufawrak, these are your pieces. He did ta'wil of ba'd al-sifat.
there.
And an example for this is Mujahid ibn Jabr, for example. When it came to the ayah Surah Al-Qiyamah, وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة.
Okay, the point is that he says, oh, just because you do ta'wil doesn't make you Ash'ari, right? Now, there's more than just the ta'wil. I'm going to go into it. But I do want to start here with a statement from Ibn Uthaymeen, who is one of the foremost authorities, maybe the most authoritative modern Salafi scholar, volume 1, page 115, 116 of Majmu' Fatawa. He talks about the division of Sunnism into two parts, Ash'ari Maturidi, right? And then interestingly, he says here that these are the two sects, right? One of them is the school of Ibn Taymiyyah and his students. We prevent the text from being distracted from their apparent meanings. As for the Ash'ari Maturidi, which obligate them to be distracted from their apparent meanings and names and attributes. So you see, when it comes to Ibn Uthaymeen, he certainly defines one of the distinguishing features of Ash'ari Maturidi as their approach to the names and attributes. So this guy, I don't even know if he's a scholar, but he's making it seem like that's not, okay, fine, that's just a small thing on the side. Well, not according to Ibn Uthaymeen, who's one of the foremost authorities of your sect. He's saying that is one of these distinguishing traits, right? We can continue the text, right? They take the literal meaning in the names and attributes, right? And their meanings must be diverted from its apparent meaning. This is the Asharis and Maturidis, right? So obviously he sees that as a pretty important distinction, right? And now we can go to Bin Baz, right? He has a book called Book of the Right Creed, and it's contrasting. Page 1314, they ask him a similar question, right? He actually says, this includes those who denied some attributes and affirmed some of them, such as the Asharis, right? As for Ahl Sunnah, they affirm to God what he affirmed for himself, right? And so it's clear both Ibn Baz, right? Ibn Baz and Ibn Uthaymeen, two major figures of the modern Salafi movement. To them, this is maybe the most distinguishing feature, of the Asharis, at least in their mind, is the approach to the attributes. So when you try to belittle that and say, "Oh, that doesn't make someone Ashari," okay, so my question would be, what are they then? What is their creed if they're not Ashari? Right? That's it. Like, can you answer that question? And why don't I go over their creed real quick? All right. So I want to look at okay. So let's look at Bin Baz. He actually responded to this question about Al-Nawawi ibn Hajar, right? In his Majmu' Fatawa, volume 28, page 254. They asked him about Ibn Hajar, right? Whoever makes a mistake, essentially what he says is, you know, if he is from the people of the Salafi creed and falls into some mistakes, then we leave the mistakes, and he leaves the mistakes and does not come out with this from the Salafi creed. If he is known to follow the Salaf, but some mistakes fall from him in some of the explanations or hadith and some of the words, we do not accept the error, we do not follow it, right? He doesn't make it very clear exactly what it is, but I believe there was a statement. One second. Alright, so I can't find it now, but I know there's a video of Sheikh Saleh Al Fawzan saying that, oh, he's Salafi and what he's right and what he's wrong is he's not Salafi. So that doesn't make sense. So you're saying he's half Salafi and half not Salafi? Right? It doesn't really give you a clear idea of what they are, right? Here, I have it, actually, the video. Here it is. I saved the video somewhere here, but I referenced it. But anyways, when Al Fawzan was asked about this, he said, they are Imams of Hadith, and whoever calls them innovator is an innovator, right? Anyways, I want to show you that what they say, it's not just the attributes, it's other stuff that makes them clearly Ashari, right? So this is Al-Nawawi's book, his explanation of Sahih Muslim, right? Regarding the attributes, right? Do not speak of their meaning, right? That's tafweed. He is beyond embodiment, movement, and he's not in one direction. That is Ashari creed. You have to understand that. This is, the metaphysics, the kalam that Asharis use. And he even says in here, and this is the safest, right? And this isn't just him explaining other people's opinion. Throughout the book, he makes it pretty clear that this is also his own opinion, right? Let's keep going. This is his explanation of the hadith, the image of Adam, right? For example, he says every compound is newly emergent, and God Almighty is not emergent, so he's not a compound, he's not an image. As for the body and an image, both include composition, and the composition, that is the evidence of the emergent, right? This is all kalamic terminology. This is Ashari, right? Ways of speaking, right? So when you try to argue that, this is not, the Salafis don't like to say this type of stuff. They don't deny that God is a body, for example, right? So this is another aspect of his creed that's Ashari, right? And this is his approach to the attributes. He explains that, for example, he says he's transcendent beyond movement, transition, and other characteristics, right? Another approach is that they are metaphorically interpreted, right? And, he takes a metaphorical approach to this. My mercy descends, right, for the hadith of descent. Another part, he says, for example, there are two doctrines of the attributes. One is to not talk about the meaning, right, form of tafweed. And the second is to interpret it metaphorically as it befits him, right? Another one point he says here, without a direction above, with no limits or mechanism, right? And this is Ashari creed, saying no direction, no movement, right? You keep going. For example, here, remain silent for the confusion of the mind, and they agreed on the prohibition of mechanism conditioning, right? So you get the point. He uses kalamic language where he denies that God is a body, denies, the physical descriptions for Allah. This is Ashari creed, right? So this guy has a very specific definition of Ashari that I've never heard of. he's saying that the majority of people are kuffar and all this. I mean, let me see if I can find it.
That he repented, which is gharib, is tanaqudat, around, look from themselves up. But anyways, look at Bayjuri Sharah. They believe that the Amatul Nas, because they're muqallida, they just take the belief. They didn't do this another wal-i'tibar. They didn't look around, look from themselves upwards. They didn't do that. So to them, if you don't do that, you're not a Muslim.
See, I've never really heard of that. He's saying that the Asharis believe that most people are not Muslim because they never thought about it.
You're not a Muslim. It's gharib. It's tanaqudat. And iman to them is tasdiq as well. It's contradicting. The point I'm trying to come to is...
Yeah, he would have to prove that.
The point I'm trying to come to is the Sha'ira, they have this belief called an-nadar wal-i'tibar. They hold on to this. It's one of their fundamental beliefs. Nawwawi in his Sharh Muslim refutes that when it comes to hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal.
So he needs to prove that he's refuting it, because they always claim stuff, but I guarantee you if I were to look into it, I wouldn't find him refuting that belief, right? I would find something completely different. So you would have to explain that more thoroughly. He this is what he says.
He goes, the first thing in Islam is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu Muhammadan Rasulullah.
Like, he's saying that refutes it, right? Saying that the first thing in Islam is the Shahada refutes some other thing. I mean, see, this is how they kind of distort stuff, saying, like, the way you would imagine him, because you use the word refute, you're imagining, what I'm imagining is that Nawwawi's saying, and I'm going to refute this belief of the Asharis. The first thing is, that's what you would expect. All you find instead is probably him just saying, well, I didn't see it, but assuming based on his description, you would just find him saying the first category of belief is the Shahada, right?
Ibn Hajar saying he's an Ash'ari, in Lisanul Mizan, if you go to Ibn Hajar, what did he do? Ibn Hajar, what he did was he came to...
Okay, we already got that part. Let's look at Ibn Hajar, right? So he explains a lot of different stuff, but let's find... Why don't we look for something specific? I'll show you why Salafis clearly disagree with him. For example, a majority deny this by saying that exalted God being in a space, right? And he says some of them carried it on its appearance and reality, and they are the anthropomorphists, right? That clearly disagrees with the Salafis. Also, the space, right? This is Ashari creed. He affirms tafweed, right? Let's keep going. I don't want to spend too much time on it. This is the most important part. So Bin Baz wrote a commentary of Asqalani's book, right? For example, Asqalani said, descending is impossible for God because its reality is movement from the direction of the top to the bottom, and the conclusive evidence indicates his transcendence from that. So let it be interpreted that what is meant is the descending of King of Mercy, right? Or delegated tafweed. And he says, Bin Baz says, rather this is corrupt and false, right? And so obviously, this isn't just a metaphor, right? Asqalani clearly has that the kalam that the Asharis use, where he's denying direction and movement and things like that. For example, Asqalani said it is impossible for God to be described as high, because describing as high is from the relevant point of view of the meaning. It is impossible to be that from that direction of the senses, right? He's described by this in the senses and then meaning. And Asqalani's words are not exact here, right? So obviously he disagrees with what Asqalani is saying, which, it seems like he's denying the direction, right? Why don't I keep going? Right, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's clear that he affirms the kalamic beliefs of the Asharis and the attributes, the way that he approaches it. So my question actually here is this: it's simple. What creed is he? If he's not Ashari, because he's saying, oh, find me one statement where he says, Asqalani says he's Ashari. Okay, I mean, I'm sure you could do that with a lot of scholars, where you could look through all their books and you won't find one statement where they say, I am this, right? just because you can't find that statement doesn't know, you know who somebody is based on their beliefs, right? If he's not Ashari, right, what is he then? I want to know, like, what do you think he is? Like, what did he identify as, right? Because you're saying, because he denied the movement, the direction and all that stuff. He affirmed the metaphorical approach. He used tafweed. These are descriptions of Asharis, right? The thing about Asqalani is that I don't know if he wrote a creed book, right? He wrote this book, and you kind of figure out his creed through this book here, which is a commentary of Sahih Bukhari. But I'm pretty sure he didn't write a book where it's just his Aqidah. So you might not find him affirming some things that, Asharis generally believe in. But that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in it, right? Because there's just no book, there's nothing written where he affirms or denies these beliefs. But in the end, it's pretty clear, right? His approach to the attributes does not agree with the Salafis. He denies the direction, the movement, and all that stuff, the body, right? For example, let's see this here. Right, for example, God is above the attributes of emergent occurrences, right? This is not Salafis. They don't use this terminology. Anthropomorphism is invoked by this hadith. Essentially, it affirms that God is a body.